Hello, this is Don Victor, author of Drawn to Win, host of the podcast Drawn to Win, the director of the Academy of Composition, and the creator of the Core 80 Experience, also known as the See and Grow Rich in Art video course, which you can find out more information at core80.com. This is the Drawn to Win podcast, where I have the incredible privilege to draw artists from around the world into fun and meaningful conversations around art and life, and yes, maybe even a little food. You can hear us each week on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and YouTube. So make sure you subscribe so you always have a seat among friends. Let's get into the show. Julie Kane. I love saying that name because it reminds me of one of my favorite TV characters, Denny Crane from Boston Legal. Julie, where are we talking from? Like, where are you right now?
I'm in sunny Brisbane in Australia, and it's deep midwinter here, but most people would still consider it warm as it's temperatures up in the 60s.
Wow. Do you guys get snow there at any time?
Not in Brisbane. Temperature rarely drops below about 40 degrees Fahrenheit.
Okay. See, we deal with Celsius. So when you said 60 degrees, I was like, oh my gosh, that's like cold. And
sorry, I thought you ran on Fahrenheit. But no, it's about, it goes up to about 25 Celsius during the day and drops to about 14 overnight most nights. And on a really exceptionally cold night, we'll get as low as 5 degrees.
Yes. Remember, you're talking to an American, so we do things our way. So we use inches.
I know you're imperial for a lot of things, and I grew up with inches and Fahrenheit, and now I work more whatever works really, but the temperatures over here are all Celsius.
So where did you grow up?
I grew up in the county of Essex in England, on a small farm running cattle as beef cattle, single suckling beef cattle, and arable crops, so wheat, barley, potatoes.
Now, what in the world is a single sucker sapling of a beef cattle? What was that? A single? It's like a tongue twister.
Single suckling beef herd. It's where the cows have calves, and each cow gets to raise her own calf.
Oh, really? That's
Yes.
kind of interesting. And is that like a family? Was that a family business?
That was a family business back then. Yeah.
And then, was it a family business, meaning like generations, or was it just something your folks started?
No, my father inherited it from his father. I think his father or his grandfather moved down from Scotland in the early 1900s, bought the farm, and so it was passing down the line, so to speak.
That's cool. That's very, very cool.
It was a very cool upbringing, and I loved it every minute of it, really.
Yeah? Huh.
Yeah.
Did you like the hard work of it?
I like the hard work. I like the freedom being out in the fields. It's just amazing.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. So, Julie, what are you working on right now?
Right now, I'm working on a portrait of my daughter, called Hang On to Your Hat. My daughter is a very lively, energetic girl who I'm sure has been here before, and she goes through life at speed. And I had this lovely photo of her when she was little, rushing around in the wind, hanging on to her hat, and I thought it absolutely captures who she is. So I'm working on a portrait of her a little bit older than when the photo was taken, but with the same hang on to your hat for this journey feeling through the portrait. I think I'm the one who's going to have to hang on to my hat while we go through the teenage years, but we will see.
How old is she now?
She's 10, going on 18.
Oh my goodness, that's awesome. That's right. Yeah, my daughter's 10. She'll turn 11 next month.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah. So one day, the two girls will meet. Who knows when? Maybe when they're like 70. But the fantasy is, before they're 15. We'll take a trip to Australia or something. Or maybe you'll be kicked out of Australia and you have to come over here.
Who knows? Who knows?
So tell me the story of little Julie out, cow tipping. How in the world did the little farmer girl become an artist or get into art? Like, do you remember your first memory around that?
Yes. I always loved to pick up pencils and draw and paint. I remember when I was really quite young doing a oil pastel drawing and sending it into a television show that was all about art in the UK. My mother also painted in oils, and both of my grandmothers dabbled in art, mainly as hobbyists, but my mother was very accomplished in what she did, even though she didn't do it professionally. She painted beautiful landscapes, often of the farm, the occasional portrait, some still life. She was very competent in her painting skills. And I always painted. I was about 14 when my mother bought me my first proper paints, which was a artist quality set of watercolors.
Mm-hmm.
From then on, I worked on learning how to make watercolor work. And it was a slow process because I was discouraged from doing art at school. I had quite a strong science bent to my education, and I was dead set on being a veterinary surgeon. So I had to study quite hard academically to achieve that. But I always painted in the holidays.
Mm-hmm.
I maintained that right through my early career, and I continued to paint in my spare time. And then we moved, as a family, we all moved house down to Wiltshire. And I got married by that point. And I joined up with the Malmesbury Art Society and met a gentleman called Trevor Waugh. Mm-hmm. And the combination of those two things meant I could refine my artistic skills. Trevor taught me an awful lot about how to make the mediums, both oil and watercolor, do what I wanted them to do.
Oh,
and
cool.
the Art Society, particularly the chairman, Jill, at the time, she pushed me beyond my comfort zone into teaching at the Malmesbury Art Society. So I used to regularly hold little workshops and teach various watercolor skills to whoever wanted to come along. And that encouraged me. Also, my mother-in-law sent me for my 30th birthday on a painting course to learn botanical art, which really suited the way I was painting at the time. And from that, I pursued the botanical art, became a member of the Society of Botanical Artists in London and exhibited with them for a while. That came to an end pretty much when I had children, because to manage getting stuff up to London and small babies was too hard. I had to close to that one. And it was sort of soon after that we emigrated to Australia. And in emigrating, I couldn't really pursue my career any further because I couldn't be committed to working for someone and bringing up two children in a new country where I had no contacts. So I made a conscious decision to put aside the career as a veterinary surgeon and focus entirely on what had already become a sort of semi-professional artistic career, and set about pursuing my artistic career in Australia. And I've spent the last 7 years doing exactly that. Started with a solo exhibition in a do-it-yourself gallery, which was very successful. And then I went on to start entering various art prizes. I won the Lethbridge 10,000 Art Prize in Brisbane, and various other small bits and pieces in shows and things. And I've been continuing to pursue my career, continuing to learn. That's been a big part of how I progress my art career, is to continually aim to learn. And one of the biggest factors of that, or biggest helping points in that, has been learning composition from yourself. It's been a great eye-opener, and it was a gap in my education. Although I'd been taught very well how to use colour and how to use tone, composition had really been something I'd struggled to find good information for. So
I remember when we first met, you entered a competition. we had a contest. I mean, not a competition, a contest.
Yes.
And we were asking people to write. I believe the question was, "What does composition mean to you?"
Yes.
And I remember we read all of the entries, and yours, you won the grand prize from that contest.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember us having a conversation. I wasn't expecting to go into this, but since we're here, I remember you were saying that you spent a lot of time looking at books.
I had, yes.
And share with us, like, what was your frustration with all of the books and the knowledge that you were seeking when it came to composing and designing your artwork?
Well, I have quite a wide library of art books. And so I decided, when I wanted to pursue the composition question further, to look for the information in the books on composition. So I got them all down and started thumbing through them, the indexing, and finding what pages I could on composition. Most of them didn't even touch on composition. Those that did, it was maybe a page and a half. One or two alluded to the golden section. Most of them gave a brief description that composition was important, but didn't really fulfill my need for knowledge and need for understanding the structure of composition. And at that point, I started to Google for composition, try and learn more. And again, very little came up. And then out of the blue, you posted this contest on the Artist Entrepreneur Network, which is where I saw it. I went, I'm in. I'm giving that a shot.
And it's been love ever since. Yeah, that's awesome. And you know, I appreciate that, because, like, I always considered you highly intelligent. You just have that vibe about you, but I didn't really understand clearly, like, the amount of work that you've done to get to this point, in terms of your veterinary, you know, sciences, the art, all of the contests that you wanted. I mean, societies, you know, all of the work that you put into it. And then on top of it, you know, the love of the animals coming, probably, I'm assuming, stemming from the farm life, you know, being raised in that. And then having that, you know, a generational thing, as well as the art, you know, so it's just not, when I look at people who exist and then they're tied to these things that go generations beyond them, or before them, I should say, there's a root there. And in that root, there's a weight, maybe a responsibility, potentially. And so when you come to the table seeking knowledge, but you weren't able to really find it in a satisfying way, to me, for me personally, that speaks tons and tons of volume of what we're doing. I find it very sad, you know, Julie, that someone like yourself could go out and work so hard to try to excavate this understanding, and yet with so much information there, it's almost next to impossible to find it.
Yes, I found that really quite a challenge, and I was so glad when I found somebody who knew something sensible about composition. And even though I've been with you for nearly 3 years now, doing the Core 80 course was another huge eye opener in reading the masterpieces of the past. And if anybody is even remotely considering doing the Core 80, I would highly recommend it, because it, again, has been another huge step forward, an eye opener into composition. And I loved every minute of the course because it was so much fun. Stuff in the paintings.
Yeah, I saw you smile a lot during that time. That was
Yeah, it was excellent.
and we recorded it, so it's a video course. If you guys go in there, you'll see Julie on there, analyzing the paintings and learning. And the way we have it set up is there's a lesson, and then we go into a demo, and then the students in the video do the demo as well. And so you're kind of learning each skill kind of almost 3 times. But real quick on the Core 80, what was like, was there a part of it that you really, really liked overall?
Oh, that's tricky because I enjoyed all of it. I think starting to see how the pictures were structured, where the use of space was. So the using the daughter and granddaughter rectangles, how those spaces came in, and the repeating lines. Both of those things really were quite an eye-opener.
Now, what was cool is after you went through that, and then we had our meetup at the academy, I remember there was this huge breakthrough that you had after you went through that Core 80. And when you went through, it was like a 4-week course. And then we had this meetup, and there was something that you were struggling with for almost, I don't know, almost a year or so. And all of a sudden it was like, it wasn't even a struggle anymore. And in terms of like when you're putting a painting together and you're thinking of the story that you want to tell, and then in terms of design, what's that link that's occurring in you now? Like, how is that connecting in your mind right now?
I find it all makes much more sense, and I can make it flow together better. I don't know that will make a lot of sense to anyone listening, but
What do you mean by flow together?
I'm not sure how I can put this into words. It's really helped with the energy of the story, then flowing into the spacing and just making it start to resonate that right energy and say the right things through the painting.
Yeah.
What I want it to feel.
Good job. Yeah, it's a tricky thing because it's an experience, right? And then it takes some time to try to figure out the words on how to actually articulate what's occurring. And but I remember that first drawing you did after the Core 80. I think it was the girl with the jump rope where they were jump roping. And you were able to capture very, very quickly in terms of story. It was really the energy of this playfulness of, I believe it was like 2 people jump roping, and then we walked through the process, and it was really the first time where you were actually able to articulate. But when I say articulate, it means like visually articulate the way that you wanted to move the eye through the image, so that it would actually trigger the experience of this playful back and forth of this jump rope. And it was just I remember like just being blown away. And so I've been really excited to kind of like to see your growth And then that little explosion, well, I wouldn't say little, it was actually a big explosion that came after the core 80. So, um, you have the skills, the drawing skills, the painting skills, and you had that before we met. Um, and it's neat to see you now evolving as a composer and a designer, and even more as a storyteller, because I know that's still where you struggle with a little bit. Um,
Very much so, yes.
why do you think you struggle with that? Like, like where?
I don't know what causes the blockage there, and I would call it a blockage.
Mhm.
And I'm not sure whether it's actually self-confidence driven or lack of self-confidence. Something is, there's still a hesitation and a resistance to that part of it. And I struggle with what's causing it. And I definitely struggle with the storytelling part of the system. Once I can get past the storytelling and energy bit, the rest of it, the thrust maps, the lines, the grids, the value, the temperature, the color, that all flows. It's just that initial sticking part.
And
And I don't.
and for anyone who's listening, I always explain it this way. It's like when you have a baby, right? And the head of the baby is very, very soft, the bones, and so it has to go through this ossification process. And those soft bones, those plates, need to kind of align and then get very hard. And so our process when we're composing art is we start with pure thought, energy, feeling. What's the sensation that you want someone to feel? And you can't touch that. It's just it's an idea. It's like if you tried to hold your hand together and hold it, the air would weigh more than it. And yet within that emptiness, everything comes out. And so then we use line marks to begin to form this thought, not the image in terms of the subjects and things like that, but just really to kind of begin to visually represent the energy that we want to feel. And then from that place, then we begin to give it structure. And then we go into a composition part where we actually bring tremendous order and harmony and unity to it. And then we bring it into a value stage, which then turns it into this solid mass. And then you go into color. And so it's going from nothing, this invisible, into something very, very tangible. And someone like you, Julie, is that you've mastered the tangibility of art. And what you're going through now is learning how to gain mastery over that invisible part.
Mm.
And, Donna, who's an incredible portrait artist, is very much like you, and she's been with us for about going on close to 2 years now.
Mm-hmm.
And the other day I had a conversation with her, and she's like, yeah, good. I was able to close a commission deal for her for things like 3 boys, right? And so
Mm.
she was working on that, and she's like, yeah, I was thinking because the one boy's really into uh, flying and that kind of stuff, we could we could align him so that the upper part of his body is actually against the background of the sky, and he's up in that space. And I was like, what? Like she was, designing this story at all these different layers, and she wasn't fully confident in it. But she was right. and and so it's very cool. And after the core 80, I saw you just have that same kind of breakthrough. You're still not confident in it, but I'm not sure you've said anything quote unquote wrong since it. It's just like you see it. It's just gonna take a little time before you know that you know it. And
Yeah.
that's that's just part of the process. So, so let me ask you, in 5 or 10 years, ideally, where would you love to be as an artist? What would you like to be?
That's a very good question. It's probably one I'm mulling over. I would like to be at a place where I'm regularly producing work that I'm proud of.
Mm.
I think that's, for me, it's not being, being famous or known across here, there, and everywhere. It's much more being proud of the work that I'm doing and feeling that it's got all the component parts correct to the best of my ability. And I know there's not necessarily right and wrong in art, but I think there are enough skills that you can definitely show them off well, or maybe not so well in some cases. So I would like to be proud of the pieces that I have produced, and them to have a good story, a good composition, tonally tell that story. The tone is sort of the words that support the framework of the composition, and then the color adds the life at the end. And I think, yes, I would like to feel like I'm really mastering this and producing works that I'm proud of. That makes sense.
Well, give us an example of a painting that you did that you were not proud of. You don't have to name any client names or anything. Just
no. Most of my work I can look at and go, I could have done that better. There are different bits of it that I could have done better. I could have.
And what are 2 or 3 things that you've seen in the past that you're like, man, I could have done that better?
I had a big tendency to design before I came on to found the composition course. I had a very big tendency to design a lot of stuff on the sinister.
Mm-hmm.
My pictures weren't as welcoming as they could have been, and a lot of my still lives, you'll notice that the sinister is very much dominant. That's something.
Just so that people know what the sinister is, it's when you look at a rectangle, if your eye is moving from the bottom left to the top right, we call that a Baroque direction. And if it's moving from the top left to the bottom right, we call that a sinister. And the sinister will automatically trigger in the viewer this sense of exclusivity, secretiveness, maybe a sacredness or a hiddenness. And where the Baroque, it automatically triggers in you a welcoming type of feel, an openness. And one of the things that Julie was doing is that she was trying to paint these paintings that were to be open and welcoming, but for whatever reason, in her mind, it was switching, and she was painting them in the total opposite energy. And when we brought them onto the computer and we would just flip them, and try this, go scan in one of your paintings or look at it on, and just flip it horizontally. And all of a sudden, it's a totally different painting. Though you didn't change any color, value, line, or anything, all you did was put it in the different direction, and it dramatically changes the way you feel about that image. And so that's so Julie, for whatever reason, I don't know why necessarily,
it was practical. The window was on that side of the room. When I planted the flowers there and the smaller objects, it was sensible to have them lead towards the window, and it was a practical function of where the window was against the wall that I could get the best photos as reference to work from. I do work from reference photos as backup to the live seat, because the speed I paint at, the flowers die.
But that's a whole mindset shift, right? So rather than being a copier, to be a composer means you have to take all those things in consideration. And so you can use reference, even real life can be a reference, but if you're just copying what you see, then you're no longer the artist. And so even though you may be highly skilled at it, and so having that authority and that freedom, and then ultimately the capability to actually, move things, even if it's not quote unquote like that in real life, or in your photo, your reference, or something like that. So what's another thing that you saw that you were like, I could have done that better?
Composition has been the main area that has shown large need for improvement. Sometimes it's mood and lighting. That's probably another area I need to work on, is getting the mood, especially in landscapes, how I want it. I've learned to manipulate the mood better in the still life paintings, but I think my landscapes again still need work on achieving the mood that I want in the lighting and color scheme. And I've done another level of, I'd studied color a number of times, but each time I learn more, and I've studied the Fletcher system a bit lately, and that I think will help the mood in my paintings. It certainly helped the color harmony in my paintings, and if anyone wants to and gets the chance, then the studying the Fletcher system of color is a good way to go.
Awesome. And so when you see yourself producing works that you're proud of, here's a strange question for you. Well, for anybody. If your paintings were a type of music, be it rock and roll, gaucho country, I don't know, Aussie country, rhythm and blues, whatever. Like, is there a form of music that you love when you're listening to it, that if your paintings could trigger that kind of same reaction in an audience, that you would feel like, ooh, I'm doing, I'm proud of that experience? What kind of music would that be?
Well, that's a good question, and slightly tricky for me because I'm not terribly musical. So you're starting to get out of a comfort zone into an area that I know nothing about.
Oh, okay. Let's forget about the music then.
So, well, I tend to be somebody who listens to music with strong lyrics.
Oh,
so,
okay.
Billy Joel, Bruce Springsteen. That
you mean by strong meaning highly vocals, not swearing and cursing? Okay.
No. Yes, the ones where you can sort of hear the story in the words.
Yes.
That would be.
You like Billy Joel?
I do.
Me too. I love Billy Joel, actually. I have a lot of good memories of him.
Billy Joel was the first album I bought.
Oh, really? Wow.
Innocent Man. Yeah.
Wow, that's so cool. Very, very cool. And so, do you read a lot?
I don't have as much time to read as I would like, so not that much.
Did you read a lot when you were younger?
A bit. I'm a slow reader. I can't speed read, so tend to be a fairly slow reader. I did make my way through The Lord of the Rings.
Oh goodness. I just rented the movie.
This was pre the days of the movie. So yes, I've read quite a bit. I did tend to read a lot of animal related books. So Gerald Durrell was a favorite as a child. And his exploits in Greece, and then animal catching for the zoos and the zoo vet, lots of those sorts of books. But no, I don't have the sufficient hours to put into reading as I would like, so I'm not hugely well read.
So here's a question for you.
I'd rather draw.
For someone who's so in love with animals, why don't you do animal images?
I have done.
I know you have done, but like
for a long while, I wouldn't paint animals because I saw so many in the contemporary artists around me. I'll give you an example. I went to Badminton, which is one of the biggest horse trials in the UK, and I wandered around the tents of the various top quality animal artists painting the portraits of the horses and dogs around them. And as a vet, I could see all the anatomical mishaps, shall we call them. And I thought, I can't paint animals, I'll just get it wrong. You obviously can't paint animals and get their anatomy right. So I tended to steer away from it for a long while. And then I did get to a point where I felt confident enough to tackle animals. And I spent a while doing pet portraits for friends and family and people who asked me. But I sort of dwindled a bit. And the next problem I've had with painting animals and wildlife, which I love, is having the time to get my own reference. I don't like copying other people's reference. And although there are huge numbers of beautiful animal photos out there, they aren't my photo to copy. So I've been sort of stuck with this lack of reference. And that's held me back. Without having the time and opportunities to travel and get myself good reference of my own, I've tended to leave the animals alone for the moment.
But is it something that you would, if you could?
Yeah. Yes, I do have some pictures from Africa when I toured there briefly.
Really? Well, we might have to work on one of those then.
We might. I've got a nice one of cheetahs, actually.
Ah, nice.
But I I was in Africa for about 3 or 4 weeks, good 3 weeks, but I only actually managed to get into a game reserve for a couple of days because we were there doing something else.
What part of Africa?
We spent a little patch of time in Kenya and then a slightly shorter patch in Namibia. So it was a Kenya wildlife park that we were in.
Mm-hmm. That's cool. Kenya. I have some friends from Kenya. And we'll leave it at that. Well, that's cool. Well, Julia, I hope that we get to see somehow you working on some animal images. I did an interview with another artist. Actually, it was another artist out of Australia, and she was talking about how it kind of irritates her when people do animal images and the anatomy's just wrong. And it, like, 'cause she could see it, and it just, she's, and I was like, what? That's kind of okay. And now you're saying something similar. I'm like, well, it makes sense, I guess.
It's a difficult thing to get right, and their features are quite complicated. And yes, sadly, often I do see the anatomy go a little astray and go, okay.
I remember when I was being trained in drawing, my drawing master would often say, why is the back of the skull missing? And you're like, what are you talking about? I drew it or whatever. And it's like, no, the anatomy wasn't correct. And when you look at it, you're like, oh, like, person doesn't have the back of a head, or whatever,
Yeah.
So, well, before I ask you how people can get connected with you, I want to have a quick conversation about the most important thing that we'll ever have or experience in life. And that is, I'm kind of curious, what is it that you enjoy eating?
Well, other than being a complete chocoholic, and there is there's what I call my favorite sweetie shop down the road, which is actually a health food shop. But in the health food shop, they sell dark chocolate covered, dried strawberries covered in dark chocolate.
Oh, wow.
Simply divine. But if I wanted to talk savory, I probably have 2 favorite meals. One's roast lamb when it's been roasted really slowly, preferably the shoulder, and you can serve it with a spoon, and then with lashings of homemade mint sauce made with chopped up apple mint in sugar and vinegar. That is divine.
Wow. Do you cook this thing?
I do.
Oh, we are definitely coming to Australia now. We're doing a
Proper roast
week retreat
potatoes
near
and
you. Oh my
mm,
goodness.
green peas. Yum yum. That, and I'm also partial to a spaghetti carbonara,
Yeah,
of which I'm lucky enough
interesting.
to have a fantastic recipe where you cook the onion and bacon and then evaporate white wine with it. And you toss in the spaghetti with an egg and parmesan and parsley mixture. And then right at the end, you add a little bit of cream. And it's just done fresh and quick and divine.
You've just made me speechless. I don't even know what to say about that. Like, that's insane.
It's
Oh,
not very good for the arteries, but it is scrumptious.
scrumptious. That's amazing. What meal does your daughter love that when you make? Peanut butter and jelly.
What's her favorite? She enjoys a good steak, and she enjoys spaghetti bolognese. She can't have the carbonara because she can't have wheat and dairy, unfortunately. So that's a bit tricky.
You said
Um,
spaghetti what?
Bolognese.
What's that? I've
So
never heard of it.
spaghetti with tomato and beef sauce.
Oh, okay.
You must have heard of spaghetti bolognese.
Oh no, I've eaten that, but I've never heard of it. I've eaten that many, many times. We just call it spaghetti and sauce.
Right.
Um, or meatballs. Um, well, that's cool. That's very, very cool. And so, do you like to cook then?
Um, Occasionally, I'm not much, I don't consider myself much of a chef, and I certainly don't spend more time in the kitchen than I have to. But there are some meals that, yes, I love to cook.
Nice, nice. Do you cook more, or does your husband?
I cook more. I do weekdays, he does weekends.
Oh, really? That's a good way of dividing it up. That's cool. That's
Well, when
cool.
we first met, it was whoever was home first had to cook.
Uh-huh.
And often I worked till 10 o'clock at night, so he had to cook some nights.
And that's when he started whispering in your ear the joys of being a full-time artist. You get to work from home. Don't you want to be an artist? Oh, since you're already there, why don't you go ahead and cook dinner? Um, uh, uh, Julie, this was a good conversation. Thank you so much. And
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
yeah, okay, cool. I'll see you soon. Ciao.
Fabulous.
Hi, I'm Donna Ayers-Vorbach from New Jersey, Manasquan, Jersey Shore. And I've been working with Don Victor for a year and a half, and I have to say my whole life has turned around as a professional artist under his tutelage. He's a master composer. Studying with Don Victor is like studying musical composition under Prince. Fabulous. My work has taken off to higher levels because after 35 years of struggling to understand what makes a great painting, Don Victor has finally opened up the secret box of his Academy of Composition to explain to me that design is king, and that that design begins in the invisible world in the very beginning to tell the story, and then you build upon it, and in the end you have an image that resonates and can go global. And without what Don Victor teaches you, you have just a mediocre piece that will appeal to maybe one or two people, maybe your family will like it, but it won't have the power of design that your work needs and deserves. Thank you, and please join us with DV. We've become a great family at the Academy of Composition.
In just 30 days, the Core 80 experience teaches you to decode the intentional design underneath great masterpieces. Through video lessons, assignments, and feedback, you learn to recognize the underlying structures like thrust maps, echoes, and gamuts that give master compositions substance and gravitas. Knowing how master artists and illustrators compose their artwork unlocks your ability to give your artwork more meaning and energy. Enroll today and get a 7-day no-hassle money-back guarantee at core80.com.